with Iraqi leadership potentially possessing weapons of mass destruction and hatching plans to use chemical and biological weapons, the 43rd President of the United States, George W. Bush, addressed the nation.
The security of the world requires disarming Saddam Hussein now.
The demand for Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein to surrender and leave Iraq so that coalition forces could peacefully enter the country to seize the cache of dangerous weaponry.
My younger soldiers think we're in a bit of denial. They're like, well, we were in Afghanistan. We're not going to Iraq. Like, guys, we're going. And they're like, nah, we won't go. The army's too big. We're not going to go. It's like, no, guys, we're going to go.
Operation Iraqi Freedom began early in the morning on March 20th, 2003 at 5:34 a.m. Iraqi time as U.S. aircraft dropped several precision-guided bombs on a bunker complex where the Iraqi president was believed to be meeting with senior staff. A series of airstrikes followed, eliminating government and military installations. Within hours, a ground offensive into Iraq via Kuwait had begun.
We had a phenomenal team, literally from the two great ADCs that I had, Generals Frakely and E.J. Sinclair, the greatest Sergeant Major that any commander ever had, Command Sergeant Major Marvin Hill, and then phenomenal colonel level brigade commanders, and all the way on down the line.
While coalition troops launched air and amphibious assaults, securing oil fields and critical ports, units of the Iraqi Republican Guard, a heavily armed parliamentary group connected with the ruling party, were sent to defend the capital of Baghdad.
The enemy was a different enemy. They were out there in the beginning, and then they hid and they came back as civilians and fought that way, so that made some things difficult.
The main objective of the invasion of Iraq was to disable the Republican Guard, which made Al-Hila an important target for coalition forces. In addition, Al-Hila lay in the path of the planned coalition advance to Najaf.
My company air assaulted just below Hilla. We were in a pretty significant engagement there, along with the elements from the 502nd.
The United States Army 3rd Infantry Division defeated Iraqi forces entrenched in and around Talil Airfield. With Nasiriyah and Talil Airfield secured, the 3rd Infantry Division, supported by the 101st Airborne Division, continued its attack north toward Najaf and Kabbalah.
I had full confidence in the great air assault troopers of the 101st Airborne Division, our leaders, all the elements that were critical to the combat operations, to the carrying out of the tactical campaign that we pursued.
The Battle of Najaf was a major battle in the 2003 invasion of Iraq.
It was extraordinary. We had attack helicopters over our shoulders. There was close air support over top. There was artillery banging away. There were mortars. And there were small unit infantry fights going on all around us as we were literally walking down a street with all of his radio operators around him and vehicles trailing behind and all the rest of that. So again, the division more than validated my very high expectations.
On March 28th, the 101st Airborne Division, supported by 2nd Battalion, 70th Armored, from the 1st Armored Division, relieved the 3rd ID units around Najaf. By April 4th, the entire city was in American hands.
But once we had finally taken Najaf and we were now controlling this city, the holiest city in Shia Islam of some 500,000 or 600,000 people, I remember calling him up. His call sign was Victory 6. I said, "This is Eagle 6. I've got good news and bad news." He asked, "What's the good news?" I said, "Well, we own Najaf." "Great. What's the bad news?" "We own Najaf. What do you want us to do with it?"
The result was the destruction of enemy forces in Najaf, the protection of critical and religious infrastructure sites, and the initiation of humanitarian aid for the people of Iraq. Najaf was also the first major city liberated and the scene of the first Saddam statue to be toppled.
Then we pushed into an area just south of Baghdad called Objective Snake, which was a large air defense training area for the Iraqis.
With the initial objective secured, shifting the combat power north was necessary to prepare for the attack on Baghdad.
We wanted to be the ones that took Baghdad International Airport. That was seen as the big prize. And I actually realized that, you know what, our biggest contribution to this fight should be to support the 3rd Infantry Division mechanized. It had the tanks, it had the infantry fighting vehicles, it had all the heavy artillery, self-propelled, etc. It had been in the desert. It was configured, trained, very, very ready unit, terrific leaders. And we made a mental switch.
The march up country involved a series of combat and support operations to set the needed tactical and logistical conditions while isolating Baghdad. Adding to the complexity and risk, the region suffered through a sandstorm of biblical proportions. Regardless of these generals' hard work, they all laid the credit for the fuel movement's success at the feet of the soldiers and Marines who drove the trucks and laid the pipeline.
The key in all this, and again, the unsung heroes, were those who were pumping gas, rearming, fixing, maintaining. The logistics were staggering. We had all 3 of the infantry brigade commanders the entire period. And each of them, by the way, went on to 3-star ranks. So these were really extraordinary individuals, as was, again, really the entire organization was very, very special.
Following coalition successes in southern, western, and northern Iraq, and the capture of Baghdad on April 9, 2003, President Bush declared an end to major combat operations on May 1, 2003. The Army called the engagement one of the fastest and largest armed assaults in military history. Although the official number is unknown, about 60 nations provided support, both direct and indirect, to the coalition effort. To honor those in service from Fort Campbell since its inception, an effort is underway to build the Tennessee Wings of Liberty Museum. Located at the Fort Campbell base in Clarksville, Tennessee, the museum will span 2 football fields and house a state-of-the-art multimedia visitor experience.
Yeah, I think the museum is hugely important. I think it will perform 3 functions very impressively to chronicle, to capture the history of all these great units that have called Fort Campbell, Kentucky home. It will also educate generations to come on that history. And I think in that process, it will also inspire fellow Americans to serve our country. And that's particularly important, I think, right now.